Well, I want to welcome you. Welcome to those watching online. We are starting a new series this week called PreDecide, and we're going to have conversations over the next several weeks together about making decisions and why that's sometimes a struggle and how we can be more wise in that. I'll share some poor decisions I've made today because I think we all have a list of those that you'll probably think of at different points while we're talking about this. So let me just ask this, though. Just think to yourself, what is the difference between people that really seem to have it together and those that don't? Those that seem to be really fulfilled in their lives, and it may be, they have fulfilling marriages, they have great relationships with their kids, financially they're on top of it, they have meaningful careers, and then those that are struggling. And maybe they're not struggling in every area of their life, but there's just areas, right, that they struggle to have a relationship that's successful. They struggle to be wise with their finances. They struggle to get their health under control. They struggle to find meaningful work. I'll tell you what it's not. It's not talent, right? It's not appearance, right? It's not just their intelligence. Because we've all seen smart people that are miserable, haven't we? Right? We've seen talented people that are broke. And we've seen very attractive people that can't seem to have a successful relationship. We all know people like that. Don't look at them if they're here. Right? We know people. We've seen people like it. So it's not those things. What I would suggest to you, and kind of the basis of our conversation today, is I would suggest that it's their decisions. That the decisions we make are incredibly important. And I would even contend that the quality of your decisions will determine the quality of your life. Right? The quality of your decisions will determine the quality of your life. You make decisions, and then your decisions make you. And the problem is, many of us, if we're just being real and being honest, we're not great decision makers, are we? You want to eat right. You want to be healthy, but you still find yourself going through that drive-thru or grabbing junk food out of the pantry way too often. You want to be wise with your finances and be on a budget. However, yet again, you find yourself impulse buying. You want to use your words in helpful and constructive ways, and you find yourself saying something that's hurtful to someone else. You want to love those that are closest to you, but oftentimes those we hurt the most are the ones that are right around us. You want to use your time well and be wise with your time and how you spend it, yet way too many nights you find yourself binge watching yet another series. That one must have hit close to home. No one responded to any of the others. And we're just, if we're being honest, we're not great decision makers. And for some of us, there's areas of our life that we do really well in, and then there's there's other areas that we struggle in. I was thinking through all of the poor decisions I've made, getting ready for today, and all these are just the ones I could remember, and there's a long list of them. And I was trying to think back to like the first big poor decision I made when I was younger. Like where did it start? And the farthest back I could get was 7th grade. And so I was thinking about 7th grade. It was the last day of school, and I was in choir. Now, any of you that stand around me when I worship, you would probably know that's a poor decision right there. My wife has told me multiple times not to sing too loud in worship. But I was in choir. It was the last day of school. Choir was in the afternoon, and there was a boy behind me sitting in choir. We'll call him Kyle. That was his name. His name was Kyle. He's probably not watching this, but Kyle was sitting behind me, and I'll be honest, I don't remember what he did. But he did something that really, really upset me, really bothered me, ticked me off, and I did something I'd never done in school up until that point. I never did in school afterwards. I turned around and I punched him. Another poor decision. And for the life of me, I can't remember what he did, but I did that. And now Kyle was smarter than I and a better decision maker than I did. And so instead of punching me back, right, he just yells out loud, and the teacher's on the far side of the room. And you know how kids do in school, right? They all kind of go, whoa, and they back up because it's like there's going to be a fight or something. But Kyle doesn't respond, and he yells out, and the teacher starts walking over. Now, I would like to say I was mature and that when she came over, I confessed and I repented and I owned up to what I did, but I didn't do that at all. When the teacher was walking over, I covered my face and I was like, well, I'm going to tell her he punched me, so I started rubbing my eye and rubbing the side of my face. And so when she got over, I think he said something first, like, oh, he hit me. And I was like, well, he hit me. And I was like, look at my face. And now the thing I didn't take into account were all the other kids. No one had my back. And so they immediately rat me out and tell the truth of what happened. And she's really frustrated with me. It's the last day of school. And so she sends me down to the principal's office. Never been down to the principal's office for fighting. Didn't go down to the principal's office very often for anything. But so I was terrified, right? Last day of school, I am just picturing, they're going to make me go to summer school. I don't know what was going to happen. So I went down to the office and I sat down there. It was afternoon. I was down there for about an hour. The principal wasn't around. He was doing last day of school stuff. And finally, it was getting towards the end of the day, and the assistant there, the administrative assistant, she finally says, okay, just go, we'll deal with this later. And so I leave, and school's over. That entire summer, I was terrified thinking about the first day of 8th grade. Right? I mean, I just had, in my mind, I had this, I didn't sleep well. I didn't tell my parents about this, of course, but I just remember like being stressed and not sleeping well and just thinking about, man, I'm going to go back the first day of school. Principal's going to call me down. I'm going to get detention. I'm going to get suspended. I'm going to get expelled. I don't know what's going to happen. My whole 8th grade year is going to be ruined. And just the whole summer, that weight, like carrying that around, all because of this poor decision. Now, first day of school happened, and he didn't call me down. The entire first week, I was like avoiding him and waiting for it to happen. He never did, and so nothing ever happened. But I think I probably learned a much better lesson just being miserable for 2.5 months during the summer than I would have, anything he could have done. But for me, thinking back, that was one of the earliest memories I have of a really poor decision that I made. And I'm sure there are many decisions you can think about and that you're thinking about right now of where you've made poor decisions as well, and maybe even some recently. And so as I set the foundation today and kind of lay the foundation for where we're going to go throughout this series, I just want to take a minute, why do we struggle to make good decisions? Like, why is it so hard to just be wise, to be smart, and oftentimes we make a decision and it doesn't go well and we know better, right? Why do we struggle? So let me give you 3 things that came to mind as I was thinking about this. Number 1, we're overwhelmed with choices, right? We are overwhelmed with choices. Some studies have shown that we make over 35,000 choices a day. 35,000. I mean, from the moment your eyes open up in the morning, you're deciding, do I hit the snooze? When do I get up? What am I going to do first? Do I look at my phone? Right? All, breakfast and food and eating and at work, and you're scrolling on social media. Do I keep scrolling? Do I click? And do I respond? Do I comment? Which like button do I hit? There's so many emojis now. Which one do I click? Right? And you come home and it's what should I watch? What should I do? Parenting, and all the way until you go to bed. 35,000 decisions a day. I believe it. Now, a lot of those are wrapped up in our habits and they happen automatically, but sometimes we just get tired of making decisions. Cognitive scientists call it decision fatigue, right? Our decision-making muscles just get fatigued. And as the volume of decisions increase, oftentimes the quality of our decisions decrease, right? And this is why you go to work and you perform all day and you work really hard all day. And then you get home and you just want to sit on the couch and veg because you're exhausted. This is why you can be budgeting really well and you're on budget, you're paying off debt, and then suddenly out of nowhere you just impulse buy. Or you're following your diet really well and you're eating healthy. And then you just have this kind of splurge and it's like, where'd that come from? Why'd I eat that cupcake? Or like, why did I go to that buffet, right? It's like, where did that come from? For those of you that are parents, I've heard a lot of parents talk about this. Like, it's like, why are my kids so great at school? No issues at all. And then they come home and it's like they're little monsters running around. It's like, why? It's like, because they've been doing their very best and performing and just conducting themselves really well to meet expectations and making right decisions. And they're just fatigued by the time they get home. And so one of the reasons we struggle to make great choices is that we are overwhelmed with so many choices. Second one is this, is we're afraid of making a wrong choice. We're afraid of making a wrong choice. I think as Christians, we especially struggle with this because we wrap up not only a choice, but God's will. We don't want to miss God's will. We want to find the right thing. We want to find the perfect thing. I want to have the perfect job. I want to find the perfect spouse. I want to raise my kids in the perfect way. If you ever watch new first-time parents, like everything, they get the best of everything, right? Because they want everything to be right. You don't want to do anything wrong, right? You want the perfect job. We want to have the perfect wedding. You want to have the perfect everything. We're afraid of making wrong choices. And sometimes this actually leads to indecision. Right? We get paralyzed. I don't know if that's ever happened to you. You have an important decision to make, and we get paralyzed. And what I'll tell you today is that indecision is a decision. During the week, I spent a lot of time working with executives and managers as they're thinking through talent decisions and how to design their teams and how to design their like strategies moving forward, or if they're trying to find a strategic leader to come in on the team. And it's amazing, they're all excited as you're talking through strategy and thinking about the future and what it's going to be like. But then when it comes down to making a choice, sometimes you get narrowed down and maybe there's a couple people you're trying to decide between. They get paralyzed and they get caught up in indecision. And perfection becomes the enemy of progress. Why? Because they're looking for the right person. This is what hiring managers do. When you apply for a job, they're looking for the right person that has the right experience. They come from the right industry. They have the right skills. They have the right character. They have the right personality. And if someone doesn't check all those boxes, they don't know what to do. And let me just give you a hint. There's never a perfect employee or a perfect candidate. Just like for those of you applying for jobs and looking for a company and looking for an organization, there's never a perfect company. Right? There's always trade-offs and there's always gaps. Don't allow perfection to become the enemy of progress. And what I challenge these managers and executives with is while they are paralyzed in this place trying to wait or find the perfect person, all of their competitors are continuing to move forward. Their team that is overworked and stressed out because they don't have enough staff and enough people, they continue to be overworked and be on the verge of burnout, and they're struggling mentally and physically with their work, and they may leave while they're in this place of being stuck. Don't allow great to be the enemy of good. Don't allow perfection to be the enemy of progress. Sometimes we make poor decisions or we don't make any decision at all because we're afraid of making a wrong choice. And then oftentimes we allow emotions to overrule logic. It's interesting. With some decisions, we spend way too much time overanalyzing. Like I bet you know someone or you can imagine a time where you were looking for something to watch on TV, right? And you scroll through everything on Netflix, and there's nothing good at all to watch. So then you go over to Amazon Prime. There's nothing good there. And then you go to Hulu, and then you go to Disney, and then you go to Peacock, and then you go to HBO, and then you go to Apple, and you've spent an hour on all of these services, and you can't find anything to watch. You probably spend more time analyzing and trying to figure out what to watch than you do actually watching something, right? So some of you can relate to that, I can tell. And isn't it amazing then, like important decisions, we just react emotionally. Your child's having a difficult time, and you go off on them. And you say something you regret, something that's hurtful to them. That's much more important than what you should watch on TV. A temptation is in front of you. And instead of analyzing it and thinking logically about it, you just give in to that temptation because the emotions are controlling you. I talk about this with my kids sometimes, and it's interesting, when you have kids that are 7 years old, their poor decisions aren't usually that big of a deal. But when you have teenagers, and I have 3 teenagers, their decisions are a much bigger deal, right? Some of their decisions could have lifelong consequences. And so one of the ways I think about this is you don't want to make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. When your kids are a teenager and you're talking about things like drugs and vaping, and you're talking about sex, and you're talking about things they can do on the computer, and you're talking about how to deal with friends or things at school, or when they can start driving a car, right? There's these decisions that they start making, and some of them can have lifelong consequences. And so you don't ever want to make a decision that's going to have a lifelong or long-term consequence based on a temporary or near-term or short-term emotion. And many of us do that, don't we? And we can point to times where our decisions have gotten us in trouble because we allowed our emotions to guide us. The quality of our decisions determine the quality of our life. We make our decisions, and our decisions make us. So that's a long introduction and to lay the foundation for kind of the primary idea that we're going to unpack over the next several weeks. our goal as followers of Jesus is to get to a place when it comes to mentally how we think about things and how we handle and pursue wisdom and how we think about decisions is that we get to a place where we make decisions that honor God, that are beneficial for us, that help or that are aligned with the goals and the calling that he has on each of our lives, but that we actually make those decisions before we actually get in the situation where it needs to be made. And we're going to call that the power of pre-deciding. Pre-deciding. That's what we call the series, PreDecide. The power of pre-deciding. And you know this works. For those of you that have ever done a healthy eating plan, one of the ways to make sure you're most successful with eating healthy, what do? You meal prep, don't you? Right? You meal prep at the beginning of the week or the night before, and you plan out your meals. Why do you do that? You are pre-deciding. So that way, when it's the middle of the week on Wednesday and I'm hungry driving home from work, I don't go through the McDonald's drive-thru because I know I have a meal waiting for me when I get home. You meal prep. For those of you that work out, and especially if you like to work out early in the morning, what's one of the best ways to guarantee that you're actually going to get up and go to the gym? You pack your bag, right? You set your gym clothes out the night before. Because then in the morning, you don't have to make any decisions. You just get up and you grab it and you go. It's the power of pre-deciding. For those that have ever worked with a financial advisor and you're talking about how to save for retirement, what is the best way to make sure you actually save for retirement? You automate your withdrawals. For those of you that are Christians that tithe, you want to be consistent in honoring God with your finances and your giving. What's the very best way to make sure you actually do it month after month? You set up reoccurring giving. Why? You're pre-deciding that I'm going to honor God with a tenth of my income, and I'm going to do that month after month. And so I just set up the reoccurring giving. You are pre-deciding. We know this works, don't we? We know this works. Bible talks about it too. Proverbs, it says, commit to the Lord whatever you do. And so that's a pre-decision, right? Commit your parenting, commit your finances, commit your eating, right? Commit your career, commit your job, commit your marriage to the Lord. Do that. That's an ahead of time decision. You commit that, and what's it say? It says he will establish your plans. Jesus talked about this too. He said, but seek first, right? Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. Do that first. Pre-decide that. And all these things will be given to you as well. Pre-decide. And so how does this work? Well, it's pretty simple. It's really simple, actually. Here's what it looks like. When I'm faced with something, when I'm faced with that text from my favorite store that says there's a one-time only, life-changing, 24-hour sale that you've got to take advantage of, the next time I get one of those, instead of hitting buy now, I'm going to wait 24 hours before making that purchase. When I'm faced with that picture on that computer screen that tempts me or wants to lead me in a direction where I know that's not healthy for me, I've pre-decided to call a friend and ask for prayer. When I'm driving and that person cuts me off in the road and I'm very tempted to tell them that they're number one with a different finger than this, I've pre-decided I'm going to pray for them or turn on K-Love. I don't know. But we see this in the Bible too. Some of you know the story of Abraham. And one of the things Abraham's asked to do that I think is one of the most difficult things a father could ever be asked to do is God asks him to take his son up to this mountain and sacrifice him, his son Isaac. And as a parent, I can't ever imagine doing what Abraham did and following through with that. Now, if you know the story at the very end, God intervenes. But Abraham didn't know God was going to intervene and stop him. But see, Abraham pre-decided that this God I serve is trustworthy. And no matter what he asks me to do, no matter where he asks me to go, no matter how crazy or how my mind can't comprehend or understand it, I have pre-decided I'm going to say yes when God leads me somewhere or asks me or invites me to do something. There's a lady named Ruth and Naomi. And she pre-decided, and she was telling Naomi, she said, no matter where you go, I'm going to go. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. And that was a pre-decision. Right, Naomi, I'm going to follow you. I'm going to serve you. I'm going to worship the same God that you worship. A story that I was just talking with my kids about a couple weeks ago. Daniel. If you know the story of Daniel, him and his friends are taken captive. and this other culture, this other country is going to try and force them to betray their God, the God of the Bible, and to follow their God, and to betray the ways and the values that they have developed, right? And one of the ways they're going to do that is they're going to try and force Daniel and his friends to eat food and drink wine that is opposed to their values and the way they'd been living for God. And Daniel 1:8 says, but Daniel resolved, that's just another word for pre-decided. He pre-decided not to defile himself with royal food and wine. So he made the choice way before he was in the cafeteria of what he was going to eat. He didn't wait till he was at dinner to make the decision. He decided ahead of time, you know what? No, I know we're going to be put in this place. I'm not going to compromise. I'm not going to compromise who I am. I'm not going to compromise the God I serve. And I'm not going to compromise the values that are inside of me to obey and say yes to this person that's trying to force me in this direction. The power of pre-decision. And one of the things we see with all of these people, with Abraham and with Ruth and with Daniel, is that there was a foundation in their life of who they were and whose they were and the values that they lived that guided them. And so it's an interesting thing as we start off having this multi-week conversation about decisions, is to think about, what do you value, right? Like, what are the things that really drive you? I love how Stephen Covey says this. He says, fast forward your life to where you die, and there's someone giving your eulogy. What do you want them to say about you? What are the things that are really important? It's a good exercise to go through if you've never done it. Actually write it out, right? Because that will reveal to you the values that you place. Like, what do you want them to say? What do you want others to talk about when they talk about you? Deep down inside, when you're thinking about yourself and you're laying there in bed at night and you're reflecting on your day or the actions you've taken, like, what do you want to think about? Do you want to be the most popular? Is that what's important to you? That you're always successful? Is that what's important to you? Do you have a full bank account? Is that what you want people to say about you? That he made it to the top or this place on the org chart of the organization? He had this size of house? Like, is that what you want? Is that what you really value? Is it integrity? Is it maybe faithfulness? Is it, man, he was always generous. He was always giving of his time and his efforts and his energy and his resources. He was someone that was pure. He was someone that he was a source of hope no matter how chaotic and dark the world was. Like, what do you value? It's an important question. It's something interesting to think about if you haven't. Because, see, when your values are clear, your decisions are easier. Right? And values are like the foundation. My brother-in-law is building a house right now, and it's delayed, right? And part of the reason it's delayed is because there was a few points where they did inspections, and things didn't pass the inspection. And so they stopped it, and the people before had to come back and fix. Why is that important? Because you don't want to build the rest of your house on a foundation or with framing that isn't exactly right. Because what happens if you try to put drywall up and try to put the rest of the roof and try to put the electrical and the HVAC in when the foundation isn't right? It's going to be messed up, isn't it? Right? You're going to have lots more issues later if your foundation isn't solid. And your values are the foundation of your decision. So when you understand your values and your values are clear, your decisions are easier. And that's part of what thinking through and pre-deciding forces you to do. When you say, when I face this situation, I've pre-decided to make this decision, because that forces you to think about your values. We're oftentimes in the moment, when the pressure's on, when someone's trying to persuade you or you're reacting, you don't just sit there and logically say, well, let me go check my values and then I'll get back to you. Like, we don't have time for that oftentimes, right? You just emotionally react or you make a decision that you regret. So here's how this plays out in our lives. And this is why decisions are so important, because our decisions are never isolated. Our decisions oftentimes lead to the direction of our life. And our direction leads to a destination. How many of you, if I asked, are you satisfied with the direction your life is headed right now? You don't have to raise your hand, but would say yes. Like, are you content with the direction your life's headed right now? And I'm not maybe just talking about your life overall, but think about that for different areas. Parenting, for those of you that are parents. In your marriage, are you satisfied with the direction your marriage is headed right now? Your health, your career, your finances. Because, see, we make decisions, and our decisions set our direction. and our direction ends up leading us to a destination. And just like if I was driving my car and I was heading west, and I said, you know what, I don't want to be heading west. Why am I heading west? I need to be heading east. You don't just change your direction, but what? There's some decisions that need to be made, right? There's a place to find a turnaround, and then I've got to make some left turns, right? And I've got to figure out how do I get heading in the other direction, but that's all based on decisions. Your decisions lead to direction, and your direction leads to a destination. And that's why decisions are so incredibly important. You may be even thinking, like, why are we talking about this in church? This isn't a big deal. Like where's this coming from? But the reality is, many of us aren't satisfied with the direction our life is headed. And if we aren't satisfied with the direction our life is headed, I bet we can unpack there were some decisions that got us to that point. And so this is the conversation we're going to be having over the next several weeks together. We want to take our life back. We want to be people that live in a chaotic world, but we aren't just victims of the world, right? There's so much victimhood out there, and people just saying, you know what, the government's messed up, there's crime everywhere, there's not Christian values anymore in the world, and there's COVID, and there's financial challenges, and poor old me. No, you are a child of God. You have the King of the Kings and the Lord of the universe. He is on your side, and He is behind you, and He is with you. Right? We aren't victims. If anyone in this world should be able to stand up and say, no, I'm going to take a stand. I'm going to be intentional with how I live my life. I'm going to make a difference. Yes, the rest of the world may be chaotic and falling apart, but there should be something different about you. When your coworker looks at you and sees how you deal with some of the news or some of the chaos going on, they should say, what's unique about you? What's different about you? That's right. You're a masterpiece. That's right. We talked about that at the men's retreat. But that's just not where a lot of us are, and it's okay if we're not there, right? That's what the next several weeks are going to help us get to. And so I just want to be real. I shared one of my failures in 7th grade, and I just want to do some real talk here about how, just as I've thought about this and a lot of the poor decisions I've made, there's certain qualities in my life that I just wish weren't there. And for me, these are probably the reasons oftentimes that I make poor choices. And maybe you can relate to some of these. So here's 6 qualities that oftentimes I think lead me to making poor choices. Way too often I'm inconsistent, right? I want to be consistent. I want to do the right thing. And oftentimes I start off doing the right thing, but then I just stop and I'm inconsistent, right? Oftentimes I'm unprepared. I don't know about you, but I know we have a spiritual enemy that likes to distract us and likes to try and derail us. And oftentimes I feel like I come up against things that's like, man, I could have been more prepared for that. And I'm just unprepared. I'm just kind of blindsided. I'm unintentional. I don't know about if you ever wrestle with this, but oftentimes, I should be proactive. I should be prayerful, but oftentimes I just kind of let life hit me and I'm kind of laissez-faire, hands off, right, when it comes to life. And I'm not as intentional with life as I should be. And oftentimes being unintentional leads me to making poor choices. This is probably the one I hate the most on here, but I'm oftentimes selfish. When I'm in there's a group picture taken and I see the picture, the first person I always look at is me. That's how I judge if the picture's a good picture. It could be perfect of everyone else, but if I'm not good. Told you I was just going to have some real talk. But when I have to make a decision, that's a hard decision, the things I think about most is what's it going to cost me? How much is it going to inconvenience me? How hard is it going to be for me? And if I'm being real, oftentimes I'm selfish. I'm short-sighted. This goes back to the making decisions out of emotions. I do this oftentimes, right? I don't think long-term. I don't think about the big picture. I just do what feels right in the moment because I'm short-sighted. And oftentimes I quit when things get hard. Right? When things get hard and I just back down, I walk away and I quit. And these qualities, I'm not proud of these. And if we're being honest, I mean, maybe you wrestle with some of these as well. None of us would ever choose these, right? None of us would ever say, you know what, I want to be inconsistent, right? I want to be, when I get married someday, I want to be unintentional in my marriage. No one ever says that, do they? When I have my own kids, I'm just going to be selfish and just think about myself before I think about them. Right? No, none of us ever says that. I'm going to be short-sighted, or I want to quit. No one ever pre-decides that. And so I think the journey we're going to go on is, how do we be real about some of the struggles we have in these areas? But also, through the power of the Holy Spirit, how can we transform and renew some of the ways our mind works when it comes to these? Paul in Ephesians 4 says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. There is a God that wants to renew your mind. Yes, you may struggle. Yes, you may have propensities for some of these areas, but he doesn't want you to stay there. And hopefully you don't want to stay there either. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Because when you know who you are and whose you are, and you know the values that are really important to you, your decisions become much easier to make. And so here's what I'm pre-deciding. And you can join me in this if you want. But here's what I'm pre-deciding. Is that instead of being unprepared, I want to pre-decide that I am ready. Right? I want to be ready when life comes at me. Instead of being inconsistent, I want to be prayerful, and I want to be prepared, and I want to be consistent. Actually, let's do this. Since Mandy had us doing liturgy and reading things out loud, why don't we say these together, right? Let this be a declaration for where we're headed. And because oftentimes when we declare with our mouth, and that's part of the reason worship's so powerful, and liturgy has always been a big part of the church, is because sometimes your mind or your heart may not be there yet, but when you can declare with your mouth, it leads your mind and it leads your heart to follow. Because we're agreeing with these truths of who God is. And so instead of being a people that's unprepared, let's pre-decide and say that I am ready, right? Instead of being inconsistent, let's pre-decide that I am consistent, right? Instead of being part of a world where we're tempted to stray from God and lose our faith and be distracted, let's pre-decide and say, I am devoted. That's right. Instead of being selfish, because it's normal, and just thinking about ourselves, let's pre-decide that I am generous. That's good, right? Let's, instead of a world where unfaithfulness is the norm, let's pre-decide that I am faithful. And finally, in a world where it's easy and it's common to just walk away, to go find greener pastures, to go do something else and to give up, let's pre-decide that we are different because I am a finisher. That's right. That's right. I am ready. I am consistent. I am devoted. I am generous. I am faithful. And I am a finisher. Let's let that define who we are and how we make our decisions. Let's pre-decide those things, and we will be different. So decisions are no longer going to be based on emotions, but on the values God's placed in our hearts. Because when our values are clear, decisions are easy. Finally, let me just say this. Here's the good news. I know when we talk about decisions and when we talk about regrets, that there's maybe things that have come to mind where there's shame. And maybe you're thinking, Scott, I wish I would have heard this a month ago, a year ago, 5 years ago, because I've done some things. I've hurt some people. I've hurt myself. I've ruined some things. I've walked away from some things. I've caused some tremendous pain, either in my life or in those around me. And I know it's easy to think about decisions and for shame and regret and condemnation to even maybe overwhelm you. And maybe that's kind of where your mind is right now. What I want to share with you is just this verse, and I shared it with the guys at the men's retreat, and I want to share it with you because I believe this is what God would say. If you're in that place where there's regret and shame right now as you think about your past and decisions you've made, here's what I believe God would say to you. He would say, no matter where you're at right now, no matter how dark the place is you're at, no matter how far off track you are, no matter how messed up things are right now, he would look at you and he would say to you, you know what? I have called you. I have called you back from the ends of the earth. I am calling you back from that dark place. I am calling you from that pit of despair. I am calling you from that place that is hopeless. I am calling you. And here's what he's saying to you. He's saying, not only am I calling you, but I am reminding you of your identity, that you are my servant, right? And I have chosen you and I've not thrown you away. We live in a world where people are canceled and people are dismissed and people are thrown aside, and that's normal. That's not how our God works, though. And it doesn't matter how far you drifted. It doesn't matter what destination you are in right now. It doesn't matter what direction that you've gone through or gone. And no matter how far away from God it is, he has not given up on you. And he is not giving up on you. And he is pursuing you and he is calling you. And he is wanting to remind you of who you are. He has incredible plans and a purpose for your life. Your life is not over, right? There is still hope for the future. God still wants to use you, and he can use you. And if you are breathing a breath right now, God is chasing after you, right? And we serve a God of redemption, and we serve a God of goodness, and we serve a God that is in the business of restoring marriages and restoring relationships with children and restoring families. We serve a God of second chances. And so if you are here today and you say, Scott, if we think about decisions and poor decisions, there's probably no one in this room that's made more than I have. And I would say it doesn't matter, because there is a God that is saying, I am calling you. You are my servant. I've not given up on you. I've chosen you. I'm choosing you. And I'm not, some translations of this say rejected. I have not rejected you, and I'm not throwing you away. And here's why. It's because we're not saved by the quality of our decisions. We're saved by the grace of God. 2,000 years ago, Jesus pre-decided in the Garden of Gethsemane. He pre-decided, and he said, no matter what the cost is, no matter how much pain I've got to go through, no matter how much I've got to suffer, not my will, Father, but your will be done. And he pre-decided that no matter what it would take, he would pay the price so you could be redeemed and you could be restored and you could have a real, vibrant relationship with your Creator. And maybe you're here today and you've never made that decision ever to say, just God, I surrender my life and I want to follow you. And today's your day to make that decision for the very first time. Or maybe you're here and you've been a Christian for months or for years or for decades, and you've just drifted or you've wandered off, or there's some regret with how you've handled something recently. It doesn't matter, because today is a day where you can decide, you know what, God, I'm turning back around, right? God, I thank you that you pre-decided in that garden to pursue me, to never give up on me. And today I'm deciding to maybe start heading in a different direction. That's who God is. We have a God that doesn't tell you to get it all together, because we're not saved by the quality of our decisions. We're saved by the grace of God. Let's pray.